I am Harrison, 32 years old. 5 years ago, I was brutally assaulted at my own cousin's wedding, falsely accused of sleeping with the bride, and thrown out of my family like a bag of worthless garbage. While I was sitting in a sterile urgent care room, spitting out my own blood and waiting for a doctor to tell me if my orbital bone was permanently shattered, my father sent me a single text message. It read, "Wedding canceled. Clear your stuff out of the garage by tonight." When I drove to the house I grew up in, the very place that was supposed to be my sanctuary, my parents and my own brother laughed in my battered face. They stripped me of my dignity in front of the entire neighborhood, screaming that I was a traitor, a homewrecker, a monster. But there is one thing they didn't know. The truth always leaves a paper trail. The truth has a funny way of surviving the darkest lies. And right now, the very same people who destroyed my life, who smeared my name across our entire town, are standing at my front door, crying and begging for my forgiveness. Before I tell you exactly how I watched their perfect, hypocritical lives crumble into absolute dust, hit that like button if you believe that justice always comes around, no matter how long it takes. And please, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Now, let's go back to the exact day my old life ended, and my real story began. It was a Tuesday evening in Seattle, and the past had finally caught up with me. The heavy Pacific Northwest rain was drumming relentlessly against the floor-to-ceiling glass of my living room window. My girlfriend, Evelyn, was in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepped dinner. I was sitting on our plush leather couch, a cup of black coffee cooling on the table, going over a thick stack of real estate documents. I had just closed on a new commercial property, a massive milestone for my portfolio. Everything in my life was peaceful. Everything was meticulously structured. Everything was exactly how I had built it from the ground up after being left for dead. Then, a sudden, heavy knock echoed through the apartment. It wasn't the polite tap of a neighbor or the quick rap of a delivery driver. It was desperate, heavy. I set the documents down, feeling a strange, icy prickle at the back of my neck. I walked to the solid oak door and looked through the brass peephole. My stomach dropped straight to the floor, plunging into an abyss of cold dread. Standing in the hallway, illuminated by the flickering, harsh fluorescent light, was Brandon, my cousin, the golden child of our family, the man who had been the center of our universe. But he didn't look golden anymore. He looked like a walking corpse. His clothes were rumpled, stained, and hanging off his frame. His face was pale, his eyes sunken and surrounded by dark, bruised circles. He was trembling, swaying slightly as if he could barely stand. I kept the heavy steel security chain engaged and cracked the door open just an inch. The smell of stale alcohol and sheer panic drifted through the crack. He looked at me with bloodshot, desperate eyes and opened his dry mouth to speak. To understand the absolute, unhinged audacity of this man standing at my door, looking for redemption, you have to understand exactly what he did to me 5 years ago. You have to understand the violence, the betrayal, and the sheer cruelty that ripped my universe apart. It was June, a perfect, golden, sunny Saturday back in our hometown, a medium-sized suburb just outside of Portland where everyone knew everyone else's business. Brandon was getting married to Clara. Clara was a girl we had both known since childhood. Our families were not just close, we were practically intertwined. Clara lived just 3 houses down the street from us growing up. She was the girl who used to scrape her knees riding bikes with us in the summer. She was like a little sister to me. I helped her with her middle school math homework. I gave her advice about her first college boyfriend. And when Brandon and Clara started dating in their sophomore year of college, I was genuinely thrilled. It made sense. It felt like 2 families officially merging into one unbreakable unit. I was chosen to be Brandon's groomsman. I spent a small fortune on a custom-tailored navy blue suit, wanting to look perfect for the photos that would sit on my mother's mantelpiece for decades. I showed up at the venue, a gorgeous, rustic estate just outside the city limits, 3 hours early. I helped set up the heavy wooden chairs on the lawn, coordinated the frantic caterers, and made sure the floral arrangements were flawless. That is what you do for family. You sweat, you work, you ensure their special day is magnificent. About an hour before the ceremony was scheduled to begin, the air was thick with excitement and the scent of expensive perfume. I was out on the main patio, escorting an elderly couple, friends of my grandparents, to their seats near the front row. They were incredibly sweet, struggling with the uneven cobblestone path, and I was holding the elderly woman's arm, making sure she was comfortable. I was smiling. I felt an overwhelming sense of pride. My cousin was marrying an amazing woman. My family was celebrating. Then, I heard the heavy, frantic crunch of footsteps on the gravel behind me. I didn't even have time to turn around to see who it was. The impact felt like a swinging cinder block connecting directly with the side of my head. The world tilted violently, washing out in a blinding flash of white light. I hit the gravel pathway hard, the sharp stones tearing through my expensive suit pants and scraping the skin completely off my palms. Before I could even gasp for air or process the explosion of pain in my skull, a heavy leather boot slammed into my ribs with the force of a sledgehammer. I rolled over, gasping, and saw Brandon towering over me. His face wasn't the face of the cousin I grew up with. It was twisted into a grotesque mask of pure, unadulterated rage. The veins in his neck were bulging. He grabbed me by the lapels of my torn navy suit, hauling my upper body off the ground, and started throwing heavy, closed-fist punches directly at my face. He didn't just hit me. He was trying to destroy me. He was trying to cave my face in. Through the sickening thuds and the high-pitched ringing in my ears, I heard him screaming. He called me every vile, disgusting name in the English language. He screamed that I was a traitor. He screamed, "How could you do this? I trusted you." I threw my arms up, trying desperately to shield my eyes and nose, tasting the sharp, hot, metallic tang of my own blood filling my mouth. The elderly couple I had been helping was screaming in pure terror. Women in the crowd were shrieking. Tom, the best man, and 3 other groomsmen finally sprinted over. Took all 4 of them to physically drag Brandon off me. He was still thrashing like a wild animal, kicking out, trying to land one last blow to my head. I sat up on the gravel, completely disoriented, the world spinning in sickening circles. My left eye was swelling shut so rapidly I could feel the pressure building against my skull. Blood was pouring from my nose in a steady stream, soaking the crisp white collar of my shirt. The venue manager, a woman in a panicked frenzy, ran over with a walkie-talkie. She wanted to call the cops immediately. She said she had to file a police report and suggested I contact a lawyer to file a lawsuit right then and there. I spit a mouthful of blood onto the grass and refused. Even with my face smashed to pieces, even with my ribs screaming in agony, my first instinct was to protect him. I thought he was having a psychotic break. I thought there was a terrible, catastrophic misunderstanding. I wouldn't let my cousin be arrested in his tuxedo on his wedding day. I took an Uber to the urgent care clinic by myself, holding a blood-soaked linen napkin to my face, my entire body shaking with shock. The emergency doctor was grim. She gave me a heavy industrial ice pack and told me I had a severe concussion, 2 cracked ribs, and a badly bruised orbital bone that narrowly escaped being shattered. She handed me a clipboard with discharge papers. That is exactly when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out with trembling, blood-stained fingers. It was a text message from my father, Richard. I expected panic. I expected him asking what hospital I was at. Instead, the screen read, "Wedding canceled. Clear your stuff out of the garage by tonight." There was no question. There was no concern. Just a cold, calculated eviction. Driving a car with one eye completely swollen shut and a blinding, nauseating concussion is a special kind of hell. I gripped the leather steering wheel of my Honda until my knuckles turned a ghostly white. Every single pothole on Elm Street sent a blinding shockwave of pain through my fractured ribs and up into my jaw. I drove past the old oak tree where my older brother Neil and I used to build forts, past the rusted mailbox I had painted bright blue for my mother's birthday 10 years ago. It took me exactly 14 minutes to reach the driveway, but suspended in that agonizing cocktail of adrenaline and utter confusion, It felt like an eternity. I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home. The faded blue paint on the siding looked exactly the same. The meticulously manicured lawn was pristine. My parents' cars were parked perfectly in their spots. My brother Neil's heavy-duty truck was parked aggressively on the edge of the lawn. I unlocked the heavy front door, my hand shaking so badly the key scratched the brass plate. I walked down the hallway and stepped into the kitchen. My father, Richard, was standing rigidly by the granite counter, his arms crossed over his chest like a judge waiting to deliver a sentence. My mother, Martha, was sitting at the oak dining table, her hands clasped tightly together. Neil was leaning against the stainless steel refrigerator, a dark, unreadable expression on his face. The silence in the room was absolute. It was thick, suffocating, and heavy with venom. My mother looked up. She saw my battered, bloody face, the suit torn to shreds, the purple swelling entirely obscuring my left eye. She gasped, "But I know my mother. I know the micro-expressions on her face." There was no maternal warmth in her eyes. There was no horror at my injuries. There was only pure, unadulterated disgust. I leaned against the doorframe, breathing heavily through my mouth. I asked them what was going on. I asked them why Brandon had just tried to beat me to a pulp in front of 100 guests. My father didn't hesitate. He slammed his heavy fist onto the granite counter, the sound cracking through the room like a whip. He looked at me with a level of contempt I had never seen before and told me to drop the innocent act. His voice was a low, dangerous rumble. He said the entire family knew everything. They knew that Clara and I had been carrying on a sickening, secret affair behind Brandon's back for months. He said I was a disgrace to our family name. I stared at him. The words didn't compute. I actually laughed. A dry, broken, painful laugh that made my cracked ribs burn with white-hot agony. It was the most insane, ridiculous, mathematically impossible accusation I had ever heard in my entire life. Clara was my sister in every way that mattered. We had zero romantic chemistry, zero history, zero interest in each other. We were family. I demanded to know who told them this absolute garbage. I stepped forward, ignoring the pain. I demanded proof. "Show me a text message." I yelled, my voice cracking. "Show me a single photo. Show me a hotel receipt, an email, a single shred of actual evidence that this horrific betrayal ever happened." My father looked me dead in the eye, his face completely devoid of emotion. "We don't need proof, Harrison. We just know." Neil pushed off the refrigerator. Neil, my own flesh and blood, the brother I had looked up to my entire life. He walked over to the kitchen island, reached behind it, and tossed a heavy canvas duffel bag directly at my feet. It hit the hardwood floor with a heavy thud, the zipper busting open to reveal my old baseball gloves, some college sweatshirts, and a few framed photos. "Get out of this house," Neil said. His voice wasn't angry. It was dripping with a sick, arrogant satisfaction. "You are disgusting. You are a cancer. You are dead to this family." I looked at my brother. I really looked at him, and in that fraction of a second, I saw the gleam of triumph in his eyes. That was the exact moment I realized this wasn't just about a rumor. This was deeply, fundamentally calculated. Neil had always been intensely jealous of me. I had the better career, the better credit score, the stability. He had always wanted to be the sole focus of our parents' attention. He wanted the undivided inheritance. He wanted to ensure that when the time came, the real estate properties my parents owned would go entirely to him without dispute. And here, handed to him on a silver platter, was his golden opportunity to remove me from the equation permanently. He didn't care if the rumor was true or not. He didn't care about justice. He just wanted me erased. I turned to my mother. I dropped to my knees, not out of guilt, but out of sheer physical and emotional exhaustion. I begged her to listen to me. I reminded her of the values she had beaten into my head since childhood. Honesty, integrity, family. I told her I would drive to a police station right now and take a polygraph lie detector test. I told her to look at my face, shattered by my own cousin, and tell me I deserved this without a single ounce of hard evidence. She turned her head away, staring blankly at the floral wallpaper. She refused to even make eye contact with me. I slowly stood up. The pain in my body was nothing compared to the absolute void opening up in my chest. I picked up the duffel bag. I didn't say another word. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I turned around and walked out of the house I grew up in. The heavy wooden front door clicked shut behind me. That simple click sounded exactly like a judge's gavel. It severed every single tie I had to the people who shared my blood. The next few weeks were a living, breathing nightmare. Our town was small, the kind of place where secrets are currency. And my Aunt Beatrice, Brandon's mother, was the undisputed queen of local gossip. She was a woman who thrived on drama. She was the president of the neighborhood HOA meetings. She organized the massive Thanksgiving dinners at the local community church. She was a master manipulator who could turn a whisper into a hurricane. Beatrice made it her personal, vicious mission to ensure that every single person in our town knew exactly what I supposedly did. She spun a web of lies so thick and so toxic it choked the life out of me. Suddenly, history was rewritten. Every innocent interaction Clara and I had over the last 10 years was twisted into something dark and dirty. The time I helped Clara study for her final college exams in the library, Beatrice told everyone we were hooking up in the stacks. The time I helped Clara fix her flat tire in the pouring rain in the Walmart parking lot, a secret, sordid rendezvous. I couldn't go anywhere. I walked into the local grocery store to buy milk, and women I had known since kindergarten would literally abandon their shopping carts and speedwalk in the opposite direction. Mr. Henderson at the hardware store, a man who used to give me discounts and ask about my dad, physically blocked the aisle and told me they were closed for inventory every single time I walked in. I was a pariah. I was a ghost haunting my own hometown. But the absolute worst part, the part that kept me awake at 3 a.m. staring at the ceiling, was the silence. Nobody asked for my side of the story. Not one person knocked on my apartment door and said, "Harrison, this doesn't sound like you. What happened?" Nobody demanded hard evidence from Brandon or Beatrice. They just swallowed the poison because the drama was intoxicating. They loved the scandal. It made their boring, predictable suburban lives feel dangerous and exciting. I sat in my dark, empty apartment night after night. The ice pack from the hospital had long melted. My face was turning a hideous palette of yellow and green. I sat there wondering how 30 years of trust, 30 years of being a good son, a good brother, and a good friend could be completely erased in a single afternoon based on absolutely nothing but the vicious whispers of insecure people. Monday morning arrived like an executioner. The bruises on my face had solidified into a sickening, highly visible mask of trauma. Couldn't hide it. I put on a crisp, clean dress shirt, swallowed 3 maximum-strength ibuprofen, and drove to work. I was a senior financial analyst at a prestigious local wealth management firm. I had a phenomenal salary, a robust 401k, a corner cubicle, and a flawless, spotless performance record. I naively thought my professional life would be a safe haven, a fortress of logic and numbers where the hysterical family madness couldn't reach me. I was dead wrong. By 10 a.m., my inbox pinged with an urgent meeting request. My boss, Gregory, called me into his spacious corner office. Gregory was a weak, spineless man who cared infinitely more about his country club membership and his golf handicap than he did about his employees. Sitting awkwardly on the leather sofa next to his desk was a young HR representative, clutching a manila folder like a shield. Gregory didn't even offer me a seat. He remained standing behind his mahogany desk. He looked at my beaten, swollen face, winced slightly, and sighed heavily. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't ask who assaulted me. He simply stated that deeply troubling rumors were circulating around the office water cooler. He said clients were talking. He said my personal conduct and the violent altercation I was involved in over the weekend were becoming a severe liability for the company's sterling reputation. I looked at him in total disbelief. My jaw actually dropped, sending a spike of pain through my cheek. I was the victim of an unprovoked, brutal physical assault. I had done absolutely nothing wrong. I hadn't broken any laws. I calmly told him this was a private, highly volatile family matter based entirely on fabricated lies, and that my performance metrics were the highest in the department. Gregory shook his head slowly, refusing to meet my eyes. He said it was a tight-knit community, and optics mattered more than metrics. He said the firm couldn't afford to be associated with scandal. He slid a piece of heavy stock paper across the desk. It was a termination letter. I was fired, effective immediately. No severance package, no transition period, no support, just a standard cardboard box for my desk belongings and an escort to the elevator. As I walked out of the office, carrying my pathetic cardboard box filled with framed degrees and coffee mugs, I saw my coworker Julian standing by the copy machine. Julian and I used to get beers every single Friday. We knew everything about each other's lives. We had covered for each other during massive audits. I looked at Julian, desperate for just a nod of solidarity, a silent acknowledgement that this was insane. Julian looked down at his expensive Italian shoes and quickly power walked the other way, pretending to read a blank sheet of paper. I carried my box down to the underground parking garage, dropped it into the trunk of my car, and collapsed into the driver's seat. I gripped the steering wheel, my breathing shallow and fast. I had no family. I had no friends. I had no job. I had no salary to pay my rent. Everything I had painstakingly built over my entire adult life was completely wiped out, decimated, erased, all because of a rumor. I pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking. I dialed Clara's number. For weeks, it had gone straight to an automated voicemail. I had left dozens of messages begging her to call me back. This time, on the fourth agonizing ring, the line clicked open. I didn't even say hello. I just breathed out, "Clara, please, God, tell me you're alive." I heard a heavy, ragged, soul-crushing sob on the other end of the line. Clara's voice was completely broken. It was the sound of a woman who had been hollowed out. Her situation was even worse, far more brutal than mine. Her super-religious, terrifyingly strict parents had completely and utterly excommunicated her. Her father, a man who preached forgiveness every Sunday, actually called their parish priest to try and get her formally and publicly removed from the church congregation. He wanted her shamed from the pulpit. Her mother, the woman who used to bake cookies for us, went into Clara's childhood bedroom, packed up every single stuffed animal, photo album, and diary she owned into black, heavy-duty trash bags, and dumped them on the front porch in the pouring rain. They completely revoked her access to the college fund they had set up for her future children. They treated her like she was a walking, breathing plague. Clara had been a rising star, a senior project manager at a massive marketing firm downtown. But in a sick twist of fate, her team lead was Brandon's cousin on his mother's side. The nepotism and the gossip destroyed her. Her life at work became an inescapable psychological torture chamber. She was aggressively written up for microscopic, imaginary mistakes. She was isolated from all major projects. Her desk was moved to a dark corner near the bathrooms. She was eventually bullied and harassed so severely that she was forced to resign just to preserve her own sanity. We agreed to meet up later that night. We chose a desolate, flickering parking lot behind an abandoned strip mall on the absolute edge of town, terrified of being seen together and fueling the fire. We sat in my car in the pitch black, the engine off, the only sound the distant hum of the highway. We compared notes. We were two completely innocent people whose lives had been violently hijacked and crashed into a brick wall by an invisible enemy. "Who did this, Harrison?" Clara whispered, staring out the foggy window at the cracked asphalt. Tears were silently streaming down her face. "Who told them these lies? Who hates us this much?" We had no idea. We knew Brandon was hot-headed and arrogant, but he wouldn't just invent this elaborate, destructive narrative out of thin air. He wasn't that creative. Someone had deliberately poisoned his mind. Someone had planted a seed of absolute toxicity and watered it until it choked us all. But who? And why? What was the motive? We realized a terrifying, crucial fact that night in the dark car. You cannot prove a negative. You cannot legally, logically, or physically prove that a secret affair didn't happen. If the people who supposedly loved us unconditionally were willing to throw us away to the wolves without demanding a single shred of concrete proof, there was nothing we could say to change their minds. Any attempt to defend ourselves, any attempt to hire a lawyer or fight back, was just seen as further manipulation. We were fighting a phantom. We were fighting people who desperately wanted us to be guilty. I looked at Clara. I saw the dark, bruised circles under her eyes. I saw the bone-deep exhaustion in her slumped posture. She looked like a prisoner of war. "We have to leave," I said. My voice was suddenly steady. The panic was gone, replaced by a cold, hard, diamond-like clarity. It was the first time in weeks I felt a sense of control. "If we stay in this town, Clara, we will drown. They will slowly suffocate us. We have to let them believe whatever insane delusion they want. We have to save ourselves. We have to go." Clara looked at me. She wiped her eyes, her jaw tightening. She nodded slowly. "I'm going to Chicago," she whispered. "I have an old college roommate there. I'm leaving tomorrow. We made a blood pact that night. We swore we would not give them the sick satisfaction of watching us suffer. We swore we would rebuild, and we would never ever beg for a love that was clearly conditional." The next evening, I went back to my apartment. I packed whatever I could fit into the trunk and back seat of my Honda. I left the expensive, heavy furniture. I left the television. I left the memories. I drove to a 24-hour gas station on the outskirts of town. I pulled my phone out of my pocket, popped the SIM card tray open with a paperclip, and took the tiny plastic chip out. I stared at it for a second. It held my entire past. My parents' numbers. My brother's number. I snapped it in half with my thumb and threw the pieces into a greasy trash can. I killed Harrison, the dutiful, obedient son. I killed Harrison, the loyal, loving brother. I got back in my car, put the transmission in drive, and pressed the gas pedal. I didn't look back in the rearview mirror once. I drove straight through the night, the highway lines blurring together, heading north toward the coast, heading toward a city where nobody knew my name, my battered face, or the catastrophic lies attached to them. Seattle welcomed me with freezing, relentless rain and total, beautiful anonymity. It was exactly what my bruised soul needed. The endless rain felt like it was washing away the suffocating heat of my hometown's judgment. I was a ghost, and for the first time in my life, being invisible was a superpower. I rented a tiny, severely overpriced studio apartment in Capitol Hill. The walls were paper-thin, the heater rattled like a dying engine, and the view was a brick alleyway. I slept on a cheap inflatable air mattress on the bare floor for 2 straight months. But that cold plastic air mattress felt infinitely better than the plush, expensive bed in my parents' house, because in this tiny, drafty room, I was entirely safe. There were no whispers behind my back. There were no judgmental, hypocritical stares at the grocery store. I threw myself into rebuilding my life with a ruthless, almost terrifying determination. The anger was my fuel. I updated my resume, stripping away any references from my old firm. I used a corporate recruiter, leveraging my raw skills, and landed a junior analytical position at a massive financial tech firm downtown. It was a humiliating step down from my old senior title, and the salary was significantly lower, but I didn't care. I needed a foothold. I worked 80-hour weeks. I was the first person in the office before the sun came up, and I was the last one to leave when the cleaning crew arrived. I didn't socialize. I didn't engage in office politics. My work spoke for itself in undeniable, flawless numbers. It was at a company-mandated summer barbecue, 3 grueling years later, that the universe finally showed me a sliver of mercy. That is where I met Evelyn. Evelyn was absolutely nothing like the women in my hometown. She didn't care about neighborhood gossip, she didn't care about HOA board elections, and she certainly didn't care about country club status. She was a senior software engineer, fiercely independent, with a wicked, sharp sense of humor and piercing brown eyes that saw right through any corporate nonsense. We clicked instantly over a burnt hot dog and a shared hatred of Seattle traffic. By our 3rd date, sitting across from each other at a quiet, dimly lit coffee shop near the misty waterfront. I knew I had to tell her the truth. I wasn't going to build a new life, a new foundation, on omissions or half-truths. I took a deep breath, my hands sweating, and laid it all out on the wooden table. I told her everything. The brutal assault at the wedding, the insane accusations, my parents abandoning me without a second thought, Neil's gleeful betrayal over the inheritance, the complete, systematic destruction of my former life and reputation. I braced myself for the inevitable recoil. I waited for her to look at me with that familiar spark of suspicion. I waited for her to slowly pull away, to ask if I really did sleep with Clara, to ask if maybe I had done something to provoke it. Evelyn didn't flinch. She took a slow sip of her chamomile tea, looked me directly in the eyes with absolute clarity, and said, "Your family sounds incredibly stupid and deeply toxic. I'm so sorry you had to survive that alone. Do you want to go get some ice cream?" That was it. No brutal interrogation, no shadow of doubt, just pure, unwavering, fiercely protective belief. I actually had to look away to hide the tears welling in my eyes. I almost broke down crying right there in the middle of the crowded coffee shop. For the first time in 3 long, agonizing years, someone actually saw me. Evelyn became my anchor. She became my sanctuary. We moved in together a year later into a beautiful, sunlit apartment in a high-rise downtown. Professionally, my relentless, obsessive work ethic paid off in a massive way. The CEO of my tech firm, a brilliant, no-nonsense man named Victor, noticed my exceptional quarterly numbers. Victor didn't care about my past. He didn't care where I came from or what rumors might exist in a town hundreds of miles away. He cared about raw talent and results. Victor promoted me to Regional Director of Analytics. My salary tripled overnight. The stock options vested. With Evelyn's encouragement, I started heavily investing in commercial real estate. I was thriving. I was successful, healthy, and genuinely happy. Evelyn even managed to connect with Clara online. Clara had stayed in Chicago and, using her incredible resilience, built an amazing life for herself in high-level corporate consulting. Evelyn and Clara started a virtual true crime podcast and book club. They talked every week. They became fantastic friends. We had successfully created our own family, a family built on actual, undeniable trust, not just an accident of shared DNA. I thought the worst was over. I truly believed the ghosts of my past were permanently buried under the concrete of my new life. I was so incredibly, dangerously wrong. It started on a random Tuesday afternoon, exactly 5 years after I fled my hometown in the dead of night. Evelyn was working from home that day. She usually walked down to a local Mediterranean deli for lunch to stretch her legs. When she came back up to our floor and approached our apartment, she noticed something strange stuck to the door. It wasn't a glossy promotional flyer. It wasn't a missed package delivery notice from FedEx. It was a blank, white piece of printer paper, taped directly over the brass peephole. Written in messy, hurried, thick black marker were just 2 sentences. "We need to talk. I'll be back tonight." No name, no phone number, no explanation. Just a vague, ominous threat cloaked in complete anonymity. Evelyn called me at the office immediately. She never called me at work unless it was an absolute, drop-everything emergency. Her voice was tight, her pitch high. She was speaking incredibly fast, skipping breaths, her panic radiating through the phone. I dropped the quarterly reports I was holding, walked out of my office, and drove home like a madman, breaking every speed limit on the interstate. When I unlocked the apartment, the heavy deadbolt was engaged, and the steel security chain was locked. Evelyn was sitting rigid on the couch, her work laptop closed. Leaning against the glass coffee table right next to her knee was a solid aluminum baseball bat she kept from her college softball days. She looked terrified. We didn't know who it was. My name was on the mailbox downstairs. Yes, but how did anyone from my toxic past find me? I had legally changed my phone number, permanently deleted every trace of my old social media, and vanished into thin air. Did Neil hire a private investigator to serve me with a lawsuit over the estate? Did my father track me down? We stayed awake all night, all the lights off, staring intensely at the door, jumping at every creak of the floorboards in the hallway. Nobody came. We drove to a hardware store the very next morning and installed a high-definition Ring camera. We didn't care if we lost our hefty security deposit for drilling into the door. Evelyn started working from a crowded, noisy coffee shop down the street instead of being alone in the quiet apartment. The tension in our home was unbearable. The peace I had spent 5 grueling years building was instantly, violently shattered by a single piece of paper. Then came Friday night. The rain was pouring again, drumming aggressively against the glass. We had just finished eating takeout in the living room, trying to force some normalcy into the evening. Knock, knock, knock. Heavy, deliberate, rhythmic strikes against our front door. Evelyn's hand instantly shot out and grabbed the cold metal grip of the aluminum baseball bat. I stood up, my heart pounding against my ribs like a jackhammer, the adrenaline tasting like copper in my mouth. I walked slowly to the door, feeling a cold, clammy sweat break out on the back of my neck. I leaned in and looked through the peephole. It was Brandon, the man who tried to beat me to death, the golden boy who threw me to the wolves, standing at my door. I took a deep, shuddering breath, kept the heavy steel security chain locked firmly in place, and cracked the door open just a fraction of an inch. "Harrison," he croaked, his voice cracking, sounding like a man who had swallowed glass. He looked utterly destroyed, broken. "Please, I know everything. I know the truth." I stared at him through the narrow gap, feeling absolutely nothing but cold, hard, righteous anger. I stood completely still, staring at Brandon through the narrow, 1-inch gap of my front door. The heavy steel security chain was pulled taut across the frame, serving as a physical, undeniable barrier between my meticulously constructed, peaceful present and the absolute, chaotic nightmare of my past. The Seattle rain was pounding furiously against the thick glass windows at the end of the hallway, creating a steady, relentless drumbeat that perfectly matched the violent pounding of my heart against my ribs. Brandon leaned his forehead against the cold wood of the doorframe. He looked pathetic. He looked like a man who had lost absolutely everything, including his will to live. The expensive, custom-tailored designer clothes he used to parade around in, the crisp polos and the Italian leather shoes, were replaced by a stained, wrinkled canvas jacket that smelled faintly of stale cigarettes and cheap whiskey. His face was hollowed out, the skin sagging around his cheekbones, making him look like he had aged 10 or 15 years in the span of just 5. The signature arrogance, the undeniable entitlement that used to radiate from him like a toxic, suffocating cologne, was completely, utterly gone. "Harrison, please," he begged. His voice cracked, sounding like he had been screaming or crying for days on end. "Please just open the door. Let me in. I know everything. I know what Monica did. I know that you and Clara were completely innocent. I know the truth, Harrison. I know the whole, disgusting truth." I didn't move a single muscle. I didn't reach a hand up to unlatch the chain. I just looked at him, feeling a strange, icy calm wash over my entire body. 5 years ago, sitting in that dark, empty apartment with a bag of frozen peas pressed to my shattered face, I would have given absolutely anything to hear those exact words. 5 years ago, I would have dropped to my knees, thanked God that my family finally believed me, and ripped this door open. I would have hugged him. I would have cried into his shoulder. But I wasn't that man anymore. That version of Harrison, the dutiful, people-pleasing cousin who took a beating to protect his family's reputation, died in a greasy gas station parking lot when he snapped his SIM card in half and drove into the night. "Monica," I repeated. The name left a bitter, metallic taste in my mouth. Monica was a bridesmaid at that disastrous wedding. She was a girl Brandon had met at his high-end, exclusive gym about a year prior to the ceremony. She was always lingering around the edges of our family gatherings, always laughing a little too loudly at Brandon's terrible jokes, always finding an excuse to touch his arm or brush against his shoulder. I never paid much attention to her because she seemed like nothing more than background noise, a temporary fixture. I had absolutely no idea she was the meticulous architect of my complete destruction. Brandon let out a ragged, ugly sob, his fingers clutching the edge of the doorframe until his knuckles turned white. "We are getting a divorce, Harrison," he choked out, the words hanging heavy and toxic in the damp hallway air. "It is getting so ugly. We were fighting constantly. We were fighting about the house, the shared bank accounts, the alimony she was demanding. She hired this ruthless, bloodthirsty lawyer who was tearing my finances apart. She wanted everything. I yelled at her. I told her she was ruining my life, that she was a parasite. And Harrison, she just snapped." He looked up at me, his eyes bloodshot, wide, and swimming with a horrifying, belated realization. "She laughed at me, Harrison, right in the middle of our custom kitchen. She poured herself a glass of wine, laughed directly in my face, and told me she never even liked Clara. She told me she wanted my lifestyle. She wanted the massive diamond ring. She saw how close Clara and I were, how much history we shared, and she knew she couldn't compete with a lifetime of memories. So she decided to remove the competition entirely. She made the whole thing up, every single word. The secret text messages she claimed she saw, the hotel meetups, the affair. She completely fabricated a massive, disgusting lie to get Clara out of the picture. And when I asked her how she could destroy you in the process, you know what she said? She said destroying you was just necessary collateral damage to make the story believable to my parents. I stood there in my hallway, listening to the agonizing confession that should have set me free. Instead, it just made the deep-seated anger inside me burn hotter, brighter, and significantly sharper. "Collateral damage," I said. My voice was completely flat, devoid of any warmth, any sympathy, or any brotherly love. My entire life, my established career, my relationship with my own parents, my pristine reputation in our hometown, all of it was just collateral damage so some random girl you met on a treadmill could secure a wedding ring and a joint checking account. "I was blind, man," Brandon pleaded, desperately trying to push his fingers through the narrow crack in the door. Evelyn instantly stepped up right behind me. She rested the heavy aluminum baseball bat firmly against her shoulder, her dark eyes practically shooting daggers at him through the gap. Brandon saw the bat, saw the fierce, uncompromising look on her face, and physically flinched backward. "I was an absolute idiot," Brandon continued, his voice trembling. "I believed her because she had all these incredibly specific details. She manipulated me, Harrison. She manipulated all of us. I came here to apologize. I drove all the way from Oregon without stopping. I haven't slept in 2 days. I need to make this right. I need you to forgive me. And I need you to give me Clara's new phone number so I can apologize to her, too. I need to hear her voice." I actually laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh, and it certainly wasn't a relieved laugh. It was a dark, hollow, razor-sharp sound that made Brandon take another physical step back into the hallway. "You want Clara's phone number?" I asked, my tone dropping to a dangerous, lethal whisper. "You threw her away like she was a bag of rotting garbage. Her ultra-religious parents put her childhood memories, her diaries, and her photos in black trash bags and left them out in the pouring rain. You let your mother, Beatrice, turn Clara's name into a dirty, filthy joke at every single HOA meeting and church bake sale in the entire county. And you honestly think you can just drive up here, look sad, say my bad, and get her phone number?" "We are family, Harrison," he whispered, desperately playing the ultimate, toxic guilt card. "Family makes mistakes." "No, Brandon," I said coldly, looking at him like he was a complete stranger. "We share DNA. That is nothing more than a biological accident. Family does not leave you bleeding in the dirt. Family demands concrete proof before executing a guilty verdict on someone they claim to love. You had 5 entire years to hire a private investigator. You had 5 years to demand to see my bank statements, my phone records, my emails. You had 5 years to look at the man you grew up with, the man who stood by you through everything, and realize he would never, ever betray you. But you didn't, because it was easier to play the victim. It was easier to marry the liar than to admit you were wrong. I reached for the heavy brass door handle. Harrison, wait, please, don't shut the door, he panicked. Uncle Richard and Aunt Martha know the truth, too. My mom knows. Everyone in town knows now. They want you to come home. They are devastated. They want to fix this. Tell them, I said, my voice cutting through the hallway like a surgical scalpel, that there is absolutely nothing left to fix. The house burned down 5 years ago, Brandon. You are all just standing around staring at the cold ashes. I slammed the heavy door shut. The deadbolt clicked into place with a loud, satisfying, final thud. I turned around and leaned my back against the solid wood. Evelyn immediately dropped the baseball bat onto the rug, walked over, and wrapped her arms tightly around my waist. She didn't ask if I was okay. She didn't offer empty, meaningless platitudes. She just held me, grounding me in the present, reminding me of the solid, beautiful, impenetrable life I had built completely without them. The very next morning, the floodgates of hell officially opened. My cell phone, which had been blissfully silent from anyone in my hometown for half a decade, started vibrating non-stop on the kitchen counter. Brandon had clearly passed my new Seattle number around to the entire family. The sheer audacity of these people was truly a fascinating case study in human narcissism. They genuinely, truly believed that just because they finally discovered the truth, the clock would magically rewind, the slate would be wiped clean, and I would come running back into their arms. The first text message was from my mother, Martha. It was a massive block of text. Harrison, honey. Brandon called us last night and told us everything about Monica. We are so incredibly, deeply devastated. Your father and I have been crying all morning in the kitchen. We were deceived. We were lied to. Please call us the second you get this. We want our boy to come home. We are so sorry for what happened. We love you. 2 minutes later, a text from my father, Richard, chimed in. Son, we made a terrible, unforgivable mistake. A father should always trust his boy, and I failed you. The door to this house is always open for you. Let's get you on a flight down here this weekend. We need to talk about getting you back into the family trust and making things right financially. Call me immediately. Then came the message from my brother, Neil, the ultimate snake in the grass. Hey little bro, crazy. Insane news about Monica, right? Total absolute psycho. Mom and Dad are really torn up about the whole thing. Let's grab a beer this weekend and hash this out like men. Water under the bridge. I've really missed you, man. I sat at my marble kitchen island, staring at the glowing screen of my phone, reading the messages over and over again. The hypocrisy was physically nauseating. Let's grab a beer. Like he didn't literally throw a duffel bag of my belongings at my feet. Like he didn't smile a sick, twisted smile when he told me to get out of the house. Like he didn't actively use my painful exile to consolidate his absolute control over our parents' lucrative real estate portfolio and inheritance. They didn't want to apologize because they loved me. They wanted to apologize to alleviate their own crushing, suffocating, unbearable guilt. They were deeply embarrassed. The truth was out in our small town, spreading like wildfire, and suddenly, my parents weren't the tragic, noble victims of a betraying prodigal son. They were the horrible, gullible, monstrous parents who threw their innocent child to the wolves for absolutely nothing. The social optics had shifted dramatically, and my parents cared about optics significantly more than they cared about oxygen. Evelyn poured me a fresh cup of black coffee and slid it across the marble counter. "What are you going to do about this?" she asked quietly, her eyes scanning the barrage of notifications. I picked up the heavy ceramic mug, feeling the comforting heat seep into my palms. I looked at the desperate voicemails piling up in my inbox. They thought they could just reel me back in with a few text messages. They thought I was still the same desperate, people-pleasing kid who desperately wanted their validation and approval. "I'm going to give them exactly what they want," I said, a slow, cold, highly calculated smile spreading across my face. "I'm going to give them the ultimate family reunion." I didn't reply to a single text message. I didn't return a single desperate phone call. I let them sweat in the absolute silence for 3 agonizing, excruciating weeks. I let their anxiety build to a boiling point, let their guilt fester and rot, let the relentless neighborhood gossip completely consume their daily lives. I needed them to realize on a fundamental level that I was no longer at their beck and call. I controlled the timeline now. Finally, on a Tuesday afternoon, I sent one single, highly specific group text message to my parents, my brother Neil, Brandon, and Aunt Beatrice. Saturday, 2 p.m. sharp, the executive conference room on the top floor of the downtown Marriott in Portland. If anyone is even 1 minute late, I leave. If anyone brings uninvited guests, spouses, or lawyers, I leave. This is your one and only chance. I chose a sterile, high-end, heavily monitored corporate conference room for a very specific, strategic reason. I wasn't going to meet them at a local restaurant where they could cause a massive emotional scene or try to order drinks to soften the blow. I certainly, under no circumstances, was going to step foot inside my childhood home, where they held the territorial psychological advantage. I wanted neutral, unforgiving ground. I wanted a boardroom, because this was not a family reunion meant for hugs and tears. This was a hostile corporate takeover of my own life's narrative. I flew down to Portland on a late Friday night flight. Evelyn came with me. She wore a sharp, custom-tailored charcoal blazer, a crisp white blouse, and carried a thick, heavy leather portfolio under her arm. She looked like a high-powered, ruthless corporate attorney, and honestly, her mere presence gave me a layer of impenetrable armor they couldn't even begin to pierce. At exactly 1:45 p.m. on Saturday, Evelyn and I walked into the massive glass-walled conference room. The long mahogany table was gleaming under the recessed lighting. I set up my high-end laptop at the absolute head of the table, connected it via HDMI to the massive flat-screen monitor mounted on the far wall, and opened a secure Zoom link. Clara was on the other end of the line. She was sitting in her gorgeous, sunlit high-rise apartment in downtown Chicago. She had her camera completely turned off, choosing to remain a silent, intimidating black square on the screen with just her name typed in stark white text. She wanted to hear every single word. She wanted to witness the carnage, but she absolutely refused to let them see her face. She refused to give them the sick satisfaction of looking at the woman whose life they actively tried to destroy. At exactly 1:55 p.m., the heavy glass door to the conference room slowly pushed open. They walked in looking like a grim funeral procession. My mother, Martha, looked incredibly fragile, her shoulders hunched, clutching her expensive designer purse against her chest like a life raft in a storm. My father, Richard, looked deeply uncomfortable and aged, his posture unnaturally rigid. Aunt Beatrice, the former undisputed gossip queen of the suburbs, kept her eyes glued to the expensive hotel carpet, looking terrified. Brandon looked even worse than he did at my apartment door. The sheer stress of his impending, catastrophic divorce was clearly eating him alive from the inside out. And then there was Neil, my older brother, desperately trying to wear a mask of casual, brotherly concern. But I could easily see the frantic, nervous twitch in his jaw. The second the door closed behind them, my mother completely broke rank. She dropped her purse onto the floor and rushed toward the head of the table, her arms outstretched, thick tears streaming down her carefully applied makeup. "Harrison! Oh, my sweet boy! I am so sorry." "Stop right there." My voice cracked through the silent, highly acoustic room like the crack of a leather whip. I didn't raise my volume. I didn't yell, but the absolute, freezing, terrifying authority in my tone made her freeze dead in her tracks. "Take a seat, Martha," I said, pointing to the furthest chair. She physically flinched. "Not Mom, Martha." The remaining color instantly drained from her face, and she slowly backed away, sinking heavily into a leather chair. The rest of them scrambled to sit down, completely, utterly silent. They realized in that exact, crystal-clear moment that the power dynamic they were so used to had permanently, irreversibly shifted. I wasn't the defendant begging for mercy anymore. I was the judge, the jury, and the executioner. "Let's get a few non-negotiable ground rules straight before we begin," I started, leaning forward, resting my forearms heavily on the mahogany table. I looked each of them directly in the eye. Number 1. Nobody touches me. Number 2. Nobody interrupts me while I am speaking. Number 3. If anyone, specifically you, Richard, tries to use religious guilt, scripture, or the concept of family duty to justify your horrific behavior, this meeting is immediately terminated. Is that completely understood? They all nodded slowly, looking like terrified, reprimanded schoolchildren sent to the principal's office. Good, I said smoothly. I pointed to the massive monitor illuminating the wall. Clara is on the line. She is listening to every word. Say hello to everyone, Clara. Hello. Clara's voice echoed loudly through the conference room's surround sound speakers. It was smooth, highly professional, and entirely terrifyingly devoid of any emotion whatsoever. Brandon broke down instantly at the sound of her voice. He buried his face in his trembling hands, his shoulders shaking violently. Clara Harrison, I am so sorry. I am so incredibly, deeply sorry. Monica manipulated me. She lied about absolutely everything. I was stupid. I was blind. I ruined my own life and I ruined yours. My divorce is destroying me. She's taking half my salary, the house, the retirement accounts. I am paying for what I did to you. Yes, you are paying for it, I said coldly, cutting off his pity party. And you deserve to lose every single penny you have ever earned. But we aren't here to talk about Monica. Monica is a snake, yes, but a snake can only bite you if you willingly open the door and let it into your house. We are here to talk about the people sitting in this room. I turned my piercing gaze directly to my parents. You didn't ask for a single shred of proof. You didn't ask to see a text message, a photo, or an email. You looked at your own son. A son who had never given you a single solitary reason to doubt his character in 30 years. And you threw him into the garbage because a scandalous rumor was more convenient than the boring truth. Harrison, please, son. My father pleaded, his voice thick with deep shame and embarrassment. We were trying to protect the family reputation. The optics in the community were terrible. We thought, the optics? I interrupted, my voice dropping an octave, echoing with pure disdain. You threw your own child into the street for neighborhood optics? What about the optics of completely abandoning your flesh and blood? What about the optics of letting Neil completely manipulate the family trust while I was sleeping on an air mattress? Neil's head violently snapped up, his eyes widening in pure, unadulterated panic. Whoa, Harrison, wait a minute. Let's not bring complicated financial stuff into a highly emotional family meeting. Shut your mouth, Neil. I snapped with such ferocity he physically jumped in his seat. I reached over and confidently opened the thick manila folder Evelyn had placed in front of me. Did you really honestly think I wouldn't find out? While I was eating ramen noodles and working 80 hours a week in Seattle, you convinced Richard and Martha to completely restructure their commercial real estate holdings. You had them write me completely out of the inheritance, explicitly citing my supposed moral failures in the legal documentation. You weaponized my tragedy to secure a multi-million-dollar portfolio exclusively for yourself. My parents slowly turned to look at Neil. Total, absolute shock registered on their aging faces. They hadn't realized the malicious depth of his calculation. They thought he was just helping them manage assets during a stressful time. I turned my attention to Aunt Beatrice. The woman was practically shrinking into the leather upholstery, trying to become invisible. And you, Beatrice, you absolutely couldn't wait to spread the poison. I spoke to Marcus, Brandon's old college friend. He told me that you actually suspected Monica was lying from the very beginning. You knew the timelines she gave didn't add up. But you desperately wanted Brandon to marry Monica because her father owned a massive, lucrative construction firm in Portland, and you thought the connection would elevate your pathetic status at the country club. You willingly sacrificed Clara, a girl you watched grow up, because she was just a middle-class girl from down the street. Beatrice gasped loudly, covering her mouth with her trembling hands, her eyes darting frantically around the room as Brandon stopped crying and stared at his own mother in absolute horrified, disgusted disbelief. "You are all sick," Clara's voice suddenly rang out from the speakers, slicing through the heavy tension like a serrated razor blade. "You talk constantly about family values, you talk about church and forgiveness, but you are the most hollow, ruthless, disgusting people I have ever met. My parents threw my childhood belongings in the trash. You people systematically destroyed my career. You treated us like we were diseased animals." "Clara, sweetie, please try to understand," my mother sobbed, burying her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. "Do not ever call me sweetie," Clara commanded, her voice vibrating with immense authority. "You do not get to use affectionate terms with me ever again. We didn't agree to this meeting to reconcile, Martha. We agreed to this meeting to look you in the eyes and tell you that you hold absolutely zero power over us anymore. We survived you." I closed the manila folder with a loud snap. I looked at the people who raised me, the people who were supposed to protect me from the world. I saw nothing but weak, pathetic strangers. "I have a great, beautiful life in Seattle," I said, my voice completely steady, devoid of any anger now. "I have a career you couldn't even begin to comprehend. I have a woman beside me who showed me what actual unconditional loyalty looks like. I am completely, entirely whole without you." I stood up from the heavy leather chair. Evelyn stood up simultaneously beside me, her posture perfect, acting as a silent, unyielding sentinel. "I have retained a highly aggressive corporate lawyer in Portland," I announced, delivering the final, crushing blow. "If any of you attempt to contact my employer, if any of you show up at my apartment building again, or if Beatrice breathes my name or Clara's name at another HOA meeting, I will file a harassment and defamation lawsuit so massive it will bankrupt your entire family line. This is the absolute last time you will ever see my face, and it is the last time you will ever hear my voice." "Harrison, no. You can't do this," my father shouted, standing up, his face flushed red with panic and regret. "We are your family." "You were my family?" I corrected him, calmly buttoning my suit jacket. "Now, you are just a cautionary tale about what happens when you value gossip over blood." I walked over to the laptop, hit the end meeting button, and cut the feed. The massive screen went instantly black. Without looking back, without a single moment of hesitation, Evelyn and I walked out of the glass doors, leaving them sitting in the suffocating, deafening silence of their own devastating, irreversible consequences. The fallout from that specific conference room meeting was absolute, total devastation for the people who once thought they were completely untouchable. I didn't even have to lift a single finger to destroy their perfectly curated suburban lives. I just had to step out of the way, remove myself as their punching bag, and let the sheer weight of their own toxic choices collapse violently on top of them. Brandon's highly contested divorce from Monica became a spectacular, incredibly public disaster that made the front page of the local papers. Monica's ruthless, high-priced lawyer absolutely eviscerated him in family court. Because Brandon had signed a poorly structured, downloaded prenuptial agreement in his desperate, blind rush to marry her, she legally walked away with over half of his accumulated 401k, a massive, crippling chunk of his monthly salary in permanent alimony, and the full deed to their custom-built, four-bedroom suburban home. Brandon was forcefully evicted and had to move into a tiny, depressing, one-bedroom apartment complex on the bad side of town, driving a beat-up sedan. The golden child, the man who arrogantly thought he could punch his way out of all his problems, was now financially ruined, drowning in debt, and completely isolated from everyone. But the real, earth-shattering explosion happened within my immediate family unit. My parents, finally waking up from their deep delusion and realizing how badly they had been played, immediately turned their sights on Neil. The horrifying revelation that Neil had actively, maliciously manipulated my painful exile to entirely rewrite the inheritance trust and secure the family's lucrative commercial real estate portfolio for himself shattered whatever fragile illusion of a happy family they had left. My father, Richard, a man who valued traditional loyalty and respect above all else, felt completely, utterly betrayed by his eldest, supposedly faithful son. My father hired a forensic accountant and a team of cutthroat estate lawyers. They dragged Neil through a grueling, highly publicized, incredibly humiliating legal battle to completely reverse the trust documents. Neil arrogantly tried to fight it in court, claiming the documents were legally binding, but he had clumsily left a massive, undeniable paper trail of shady emails to his lawyers and coerced signatures from our aging parents. Neil was officially legally written out of the will entirely. His expensive, heavy-duty truck was repossessed by the bank when he couldn't make the exorbitant monthly payments without his secret allowance siphoned from the family accounts. The last I heard through the grapevine, he was working a miserable, low-paying middle management job at a logistics company, completely estranged from our parents. My parents now eat their elaborate Thanksgiving dinners in complete, deafening silence, sitting alone at a massive dining table in an empty house, entirely haunted by the ghost of the son they threw away. Aunt Beatrice didn't fare much better in the aftermath. Once the truth about her actively knowing Monica's lies and encouraging the marriage came out, because Brandon angrily screamed it at her in the middle of the street, he completely cut off all contact with his mother. The entire neighborhood quickly caught wind of the true story, and the tight-knit, judgmental suburban community turned on her with vicious, terrifying speed. The woman who thrived on organizing HOA meetings and spreading church gossip was suddenly the ultimate pariah. She was unanimously voted off the neighborhood board in a humiliating public meeting, and people would actively cross the street at the local grocery store, abandoning their carts just to avoid making eye contact with her. She finally got a bitter taste of the exact same medicine she had eagerly forced down my throat 5 years prior. While their world was actively burning to the ground, mine was finally beautifully taking flight. I returned to Seattle feeling lighter, freer, and more powerful than I had in half a decade. The heavy, suffocating iron anchor of my past had finally been cut loose. I threw myself back into my corporate work with a renewed, laser-sharp focus. Not out of a desperate need to prove them wrong this time, but out of pure, unadulterated passion for the life I was building. 3 months after the intense confrontation in Portland, I was called into the massive top-floor office of Victor, the CEO of my financial tech firm. Victor was a man of very few words, a stoic, brilliant leader who valued absolute integrity above all else. He motioned for me to sit down in the plush leather chair opposite his massive, imposing oak desk. He didn't smile, but there was a deep, undeniable respect in his eyes as he looked at me. "Harrison," Victor started, leaning back and carefully steepling his fingers, "I've been extensively reviewing the quarterly metrics for the entire Pacific Northwest sector. Your division didn't just hit the projected targets. You completely obliterated them. The new commercial real estate acquisition models you implemented last quarter saved the company millions in tax liabilities." "Thank you, Victor. I have a great team working under me," I replied, keeping it highly professional. Victor shook his head slightly, a rare smirk appearing. "It's not just the numbers on the spreadsheet, Harrison. It's your character. I know a little bit about what you went through to get to this city. I know you had to start over from absolute zero. You didn't let the betrayal break you. You let it forge you into something stronger. That kind of mental resilience is incredibly rare, and it is exactly what this company desperately needs at the executive leadership level." He opened his desk drawer and slid a thick, heavy-stock, sealed envelope across the polished wood. "I am officially promoting you to Vice President of Regional Operations," Victor announced, his voice ringing with finality. "It comes with a massive salary bump, a highly lucrative new equity package, a company car, and a corner office on the 40th floor with a view of the Sound." I stared at the thick envelope. 5 years ago, I was sitting in a freezing car in a dark, abandoned parking lot, fired from my mid-level job, my face violently smashed in, wondering if my life was completely, irreparably over. Now, I was confidently accepting an executive position at one of the top financial firms in the city. I took the envelope, shook Victor's hand firmly, and confidently walked out of the office. I didn't immediately go back to my cubicle to celebrate. I took the express elevator down to the lobby, walked out into the crisp, beautiful Seattle air, and hailed a cab. I gave the driver the exact address of an exclusive boutique jeweler I had been researching for over 6 months. I walked into the quiet, perfectly lit store. The manager recognized me immediately from my previous consultations. He smiled warmly, walked over to a highly secure, reinforced glass case, and pulled out a small, deep blue velvet box. He carefully opened it under the brilliant halogen lights. Resting perfectly on the black velvet was a flawless, custom-designed, 2-carat diamond ring. It was elegant, remarkably strong, and completely unique, just like Evelyn. I paid for it in full using the substantial bonus I had earned entirely on my own merit. No family money, no shady inheritance, no trust funds. Every single dollar was earned through my own blood, sweat, and undeniable resilience. I put the small velvet box deep into the inside pocket of my coat, feeling the heavy, comforting weight of it against my chest as I walked back out into the rain. I planned the proposal for a quiet, rainy Sunday morning. Evelyn and I had always loved the rain. It was the backdrop to our very beginning, the soothing, constant white noise that helped wash away the chaotic, terrifying noise of my past. We were relaxing in our high-rise apartment. The rich smell of fresh, dark roast coffee and warm cinnamon rolls filled the air. Evelyn was wearing one of my oversized, faded college hoodies, her dark hair tied up in a messy bun, sitting cross-legged on the plush rug in front of the large floor-to-ceiling window, deeply engrossed in reading a new thriller novel. I didn't need a grand, expensive public spectacle. I didn't need to hire a flash mob in a park, and I certainly didn't need a hidden photographer hiding in the bushes. I just needed her. I carefully poured 2 steaming mugs of coffee, walked over, and sat down on the floor right next to her. She looked up, smiling, her brown eyes incredibly warm and completely unguarded. I set the mugs down on the glass coffee table. I took a deep, steadying breath, reaching my hand into the pocket of my sweatpants. "Evelyn," I said softly, my voice filled with a quiet intensity. She closed her book, immediately sensing the shift in the atmosphere. "What is it? Is everything okay?" I slowly pulled the small velvet box out and held it securely in the palm of my hand. 5 years ago, I came to this city completely, utterly broken. I was entirely hollowed out. I had nothing to my name but a car full of clothes and a bruised face. I truly thought I would never, ever be able to trust another human being for the rest of my natural life. I thought the concept of family was just a weapon people used to hurt you when you were most vulnerable. Evelyn's breath hitched audibly. Her hands moved up to cover her mouth, her eyes widening. "But then I met you," I continued, my voice thick with emotion, but entirely steady and sure. "You didn't try to fix me, Evelyn. You did something infinitely better. You gave me a safe, secure place to fix myself. You fully believed in me when I was a complete stranger with a wild story. You stood fiercely by me when the ghosts of my past came knocking at our door. You are my absolute sanctuary. You are my family." I opened the box, revealing the stunning diamond catching the soft, gray morning light filtering through the window. I don't want a massive, stressful wedding. I don't want the drama or the fake smiles. I just want you, for the rest of my life. "Evelyn, will you marry me?" Tears spilled over her eyelashes, tracing rapid paths down her cheeks. She didn't hesitate for a fraction of a second. She didn't pause to think. She threw her arms around my neck, burying her face in my shoulder, and whispered, "Yes, yes, Harrison. Absolutely yes. 1,000,000 times yes." I slid the ring onto her finger. It was a perfect, flawless fit. A few weeks later, a thick, beautifully embossed envelope arrived in our mailbox. The return address was from Chicago. I opened it at the kitchen counter while Evelyn was making breakfast. It was a wedding invitation. Clara was getting married to her longtime fiancé, a fantastic, incredibly supportive guy named David, who treated her like absolute royalty. Inside the formal invitation was a small, handwritten note from Clara. "Harrison and Evelyn, I am only inviting the family I actually chose to have in my life. Please come to Chicago and celebrate with us. We survived, Harrison. We actually survived the fire." I looked at the invitation, a profound, unshakable sense of peace settling over my soul. We hadn't just survived the fire. We had walked through it, conquered it, and built a castle from the ashes. Sometimes the universe does you a massive, disguised favor by violently removing the toxic elements from your life, even if it hurts like absolute hell at the time. My family's brutal betrayal felt like a public execution, but in reality, it was a profound liberation. It forced me to strip away all the societal expectations, the exhausting people-pleasing, and the desperate need for validation from people who were fundamentally, psychologically incapable of giving it. I learned the hardest lesson a man can possibly learn. Blood does not automatically make you family. Shared DNA is not a contract for abuse. Loyalty, mutual respect, and unconditional trust are the only things that make you family. You cannot control what toxic people say about you behind closed doors. You cannot control the vicious rumors, the fabricated lies, or the relentless gossip. But you can absolutely 100% control how you respond to it. You can refuse to roll over and play the victim. You can refuse to internalize their deep sickness. You can draw a hard, impenetrable boundary line in the sand and walk away, dedicating your energy to building a fortress of success and happiness that they can never, ever touch. The best revenge isn't getting into screaming matches at Thanksgiving. It isn't posting passive-aggressive quotes on the internet. It isn't trying to prove them wrong with facts they refuse to believe. The absolute best, most devastatingly effective revenge is complete, total, unapologetic indifference. It is living a life so incredibly beautiful, so deeply fulfilling, that their names become nothing more than a tiny, insignificant footnote in the history of your success. Let's pause for a moment. Thank you for staying with me this far. You're truly amazing. Please help me by liking the video and commenting the number 1 below so I know you've been here with me until this point. This not only helps more people discover this story, but also lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone out there who might be hurting. Your support is the absolute greatest motivation for me to keep sharing the rest of this journey. Have you ever faced something similar with your own family? Have you ever had to cut toxic people out of your life to save your own sanity and peace of mind? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next journey. Remember, you are worthy of a love that doesn't require you to constantly defend your own existence. Stay strong and keep building your own fortress.